Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey, not to the bustling streets of ancient Egypt or the silent depths of a pyramid, but straight into the gilded, yet utterly suffocating, life of its most powerful ruler. Imagine this. You're awakened not by an alarm clock, but by the soft rustle of silk and the hushed whispers of enslaved attendants. The air in your palatial bedchamber is thick with the scent of exotic incense and expensive oils. Your breakfast is brought on golden platters, and your every whim is anticipated. On the surface, it's a life of unparalleled luxury and absolute power. But beneath the glittering crowns and the divine proclamations, you're about to discover why being a pharaoh was a truly terrible job. A golden cage of relentless duties, constant threats, and a profound lack of personal freedom. You probably won't survive this without a serious case of divine burnout, or ending up mummified much sooner than you'd like. But we're going to dive into the grim reality anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling adventurous, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you guys are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in ancient Egypt, not as a common farmer or a humble artisan, but as the living embodiment of a god on earth, the Pharaoh. The year could be during the glory of the New Kingdom, the monumental Old Kingdom, or perhaps the more tumultuous Late Period. Whatever the era, your role is immense, your responsibilities staggering. From the moment you're born, your life is not your own. It is dedicated entirely to the state, to the gods, and to the well-being of Kemet, the Black Land. The popular image of the pharaoh is one of absolute power, sitting regally on a throne, commanding armies, and overseeing monumental constructions. And yes, you do possess immense power. Your word is law. Your decisions can send armies to war or launch colossal building projects. Remember those pyramids from the Building the Great Wall segment. Egyptian pharaohs pioneered monumental construction. But this power comes with a crushing weight of expectation, a constant burden that would exhaust any modern leader. Your day is meticulously choreographed, every moment dictated by ritual, tradition, and the unending demands of governance. You don't have personal free time in the way you understand it. Every action, every public appearance, every utterance is imbued with sacred significance, for you are not just a king, you are a living deity, responsible for the very cosmic order of Egypt. If the Nile doesn't flood, if the crops fail, if the sun doesn't rise, it's ultimately your divine responsibility. Your failure in maintaining Ma'at cosmic order and justice. One mainstream historical fact that completely redefines the pharaoh's seemingly absolute leisure is that the pharaoh was not merely a political ruler, but also the chief priest and living embodiment of the gods, burdened with ceaseless religious rituals, administrative duties for a vast empire, military leadership, and the immense responsibility for maintaining cosmic order Ma'at, leaving very little room for personal freedom or relaxation. Their life was one of constant, inescapable obligation. Think about that you're literally responsible for the sun rising every day. No pressure, right? A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects this immense, almost absurd, burden of ritual is the pharaoh's frequent role in obscure, daily temple ceremonies. You wouldn't just occasionally pop into a temple. You'd be involved in elaborate purification rites, offerings to various gods, and reciting ancient spells, often multiple times a day. sometimes for cults far from the public eye. Imagine having to perform a complex religious dance before breakfast every morning just to ensure the sun comes up. And if it's cloudy, it's totally your fault. Historians still argue whether the elaborate and seemingly endless ritualistic duties of the pharaoh were primarily a clever mechanism by the powerful priesthood to control and legitimize the monarch, ensuring their own influence over the state, or if the pharaohs genuinely believed in the absolute necessity of these rituals for the well-being of Egypt, embracing their divine role wholeheartedly. Was it about control or conviction that made the pharaoh's life so ritualistic? As you don your elaborate regalia, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, the ceremonial beard, the linen kilt, you feel the heavy weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on you. Your every gesture, every word, every decision carries immense consequence. You are the apex of society, yes, but you are also its most burdened servant, constantly serving a higher divine purpose. Your personal desires, if you even remember them, are utterly secondary to the relentless demands of the throne. The palace, while magnificent, quickly begins to feel like a gilded cage. Every movement is watched, every interaction observed. You are surrounded by courtiers, advisors, and enslaved attendants, all with their own agendas, their own ambitions. Trust is a luxury few pharaohs could truly afford. And outside the palace walls, a vast empire depends on your constant vigilance, your unerring judgment, and your ability to maintain order against a myriad of internal and external threats. You feel the heavy weight of the crown, the subtle discomfort of your ceremonial robes, and the profound, inescapable burden of your divine role. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about the occasional assassination attempt or the pressures of warfare. It's about the constant, soul-crushing weight of divine responsibility, ceaseless ritual, and endless administration. Your life is not your own, but a relentless, public performance of kingship, a sacred duty that consumes your every moment, making you the most powerful, yet perhaps most terribly constrained, individual in all of ancient Egypt. Having felt the oppressive weight of your divine responsibility, your days as pharaoh quickly descend into a meticulously choreographed dance of sacred duties, divine king constant rituals. Forget leisurely mornings or quiet reflection. From the moment you rise until you finally retire, your life is an unbroken chain of religious ceremonies, elaborate offerings, and symbolic acts, all deemed absolutely essential for maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order, justice, and balance of the universe. You quickly learn that every gesture, every word, every piece of clothing you wear is infused with sacred meaning, turning your very existence into a perpetual, exhausting performance for the gods and for your people. It's like being the lead actor in a never-ending religious play, where the stakes are the very existence of the sun, the Nile, and your entire civilization. You are awakened before dawn, not by an alarm, but by the hushed whispers of temple priests and personal attendants. The air in your chamber is cool, heavy with incense, a stark contrast to the outside world. Your first task of the day might be a personal purification ritual, washes with consecrated water, anointing with sacred oils, all performed with solemnity. Then comes the elaborate dressing, not just in fine linen, but in the specific regalia of your divine office, the various crowns like the shent, the double crown, the ceremonial beard, the kilt, the scepter, and the flail. Each piece is heavy, symbolic, and often uncomfortable, designed more for imposing presence than for ease of movement. One mainstream historical fact that utterly redefines the pharaoh's daily life is that the pharaoh, as the chief priest of all cults and the mediator between gods and humans, was obligated to perform ceaseless daily religious rituals in temples across Egypt, making offerings, reciting spells, and participating in elaborate ceremonies to ensure the gods' favor, maintain cosmic order Ma'at, and secure the well-being of the kingdom. This constant religious duty overshadowed all other aspects of their rule. Think about it. Your primary job is literally to keep the universe running. Imagine your morning procession to the temple, perhaps even before true dawn. You are carried in a sedan chair or walk slowly, attended by priests and high officials. The silence of the city as you pass is broken only by the rhythmic chanting of the priests and the shuffle of your entourage. Once inside the temple, the rituals begin. You might enter the inner sanctuary, a place forbidden to all but you and the highest priests. Here, you would perform the daily cult ritual awakening the god, usually a statue of the deity, washing, dressing, and anointing it with oils, offering it food and drink, and reciting ancient hymns and prayers. This ritual, replicated across countless temples with various gods, was your personal responsibility, a direct communion with the divine, ensuring the gods were appeased and the cosmic balance maintained. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the meticulous detail of these rituals is the careful attention paid to the pharaoh's hair and nails during embalming. Remember those disturbing funeral rites. From the Ancient Egypt series. Section 8. Wrapping the corpse. These were sometimes collected and preserved separately, believed to retain a vital link to the pharaoh's divine essence, suggesting even the smallest biological details had ritualistic significance that extended beyond life into death. Imagine knowing that every hair you shed would become part of a sacred ritual, even after you're gone. Historians still argue whether the extreme emphasis on the pharaoh's personal performance of endless daily rituals was primarily a genuine expression of their deeply held religious beliefs and sense of divine responsibility, or if it was also a clever political tool wielded by the powerful priesthood to control the monarch, tying their legitimacy and power directly to their subservience to religious rites and priestly guidance. Was it true faith or political manipulation that made the pharaoh so busy? Beyond the daily cult rituals, your life as pharaoh was punctuated by numerous grander, more public religious festivals and ceremonies throughout the year. The Upet Festival, the Festival of the Valley, the Sed Festival, a jubilee for the pharaoh's long reign. These demanded your prominent participation, often involving elaborate processions, public appearances, and complex rites that could last for days or weeks. You are the central figure, the living bridge between humanity and the divine, and your every movement is a sacred dance. The weight of performing these rituals, often in specific sequences and with precise utterances in ancient, sacred language, is immense. Any mistake, any perceived deviation from Ma'at could be interpreted as a divine displeasure, potentially bringing disaster upon Egypt, a failed Nile flood, famine, or military defeat. Remember the immense pressure for the Nile to flood and the constant threat of famine, from Why You Wouldn't Survive a Day in Ancient Egypt. Sections 4 and 5. The responsibility for the very survival and prosperity of the land rested squarely on your royal shoulders, demanding constant, perfect ritualistic adherence. You're always on. There's no escaping your divine role. Even in private moments, you're still the pharaoh, the son of Ra, the embodiment of Horus. Your personal needs and desires are secondary to the relentless demands of your sacred office. Your life is a continuous, exhausting liturgy, a perpetual act of worship and mediation. You feel the heavy ceremonial robes, the elaborate crowns digging slightly into your scalp, and the crushing burden of divine responsibility, knowing that the well-being of millions and the very order of the cosmos depends on your flawless performance of rituals. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about ruling, it's about being a perpetual servant to the gods, living a life of constant rituals and endless religious duties. Your existence is a gilded cage of sacred obligation, transforming you into a living deity, a heavy price for absolute power, where every single day is a solemn, exhausting, and often bewildering performance for an audience of omnipotent gods, with the entire fate of Egypt hanging in the balance. Beyond the endless cycles of ritual and divine obligation, your life as Pharaoh also plunges you into the overwhelming, mundane, and utterly relentless grind of bureaucracy, endless administration. Forget simply issuing grand decrees from a throne. Governing a vast and complex empire like ancient Egypt demanded an intricate, pervasive, and ceaseless engagement with administrative details, economic oversight, and the management of countless officials and resources. You quickly learn that absolute power comes with an absolute mountain of paperwork, and that the well-being of your kingdom often hinges on the meticulous tracking of grain, taxes, and manpower, turning your divine office into a supremely demanding CEO role. It's like being the head of a massive corporation with millions of employees, no computers, and literally everything is managed by hand, with you at the top of the pile. After completing your sacred morning rituals, you might find yourself not in a throne room, but in a sprawling administrative complex within the palace. The air is filled with the rustle of papyrus scrolls, the scratching of scribes' pens, and the murmur of officials presenting reports. You are surrounded by your viziers, treasurers, chief scribes, and various department heads, all vying for your attention, each with a problem or a decision requiring your divine approval. One mainstream historical fact that utterly redefines the pharaoh's daily practical role is that the pharaoh, as the supreme administrative head of ancient Egypt, oversaw a vast and complex bureaucracy responsible for managing the kingdom's economy, especially agriculture and taxation, infrastructure irrigation, building projects, justice system, and military, requiring constant attention to detailed reports, petitions, and the oversight of a large official class. Their administrative responsibilities were as weighty as their religious duties. Think about it. You're not just responsible for the sun, but also for ensuring Farmer Amos paid his grain taxes. Imagine the sheer volume of information that crosses your desk, or, rather, your intricately carved writing table. Daily reports on the Nile's inundation levels. Too low means famine. Too high means flooding. Both are your divine fault. Records of grain harvests from every Nome province, meticulously tabulated, as the grain supply is the very lifeblood of your kingdom. Petitions from local officials requesting resources for irrigation projects, or complaints about rebellious villagers. Military dispatches from the frontiers, detailing skirmishes or diplomatic overtures. We'll dive into foreign relations later. You're expected to read, understand, and make decisions on all of it. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the meticulous, almost obsessive, nature of Egyptian bureaucracy is the widespread use of official seals and precise dating on countless administrative documents. Every transaction, every order, every report, even the movement of grain from a granary, could be recorded, sealed, and archived. Imagine a governmental system so devoted to paperwork that even a delivery of bread to the palace requires multiple signed and sealed documents, all to track everything perfectly. Historians still argue whether the complex and extensive nature of the ancient Egyptian bureaucracy was primarily a brilliant system for efficiently managing a vast, resource-rich empire, ensuring remarkable stability over millennia, or if it also created opportunities for corruption and inefficiency, with officials focused more on meticulous record-keeping than on practical problem-solving for the common populace. Did it create stability, or just a lot of paperwork? Your decisions are not just about grand strategy, they are often about incredibly granular details. Approving a new levy of conscripted labor for a quarry. Remember those miserable jobs. Deciding on the allocation of bronze for tool production. Authorizing the release of grain from royal granaries to a famine-stricken region, a decision that could save or condemn thousands. Every signature, every pronouncement, carries immense weight, affecting the lives of countless subjects. You are constantly surrounded by scribes, the literate elite of Egypt, who meticulously record your every word, every decree, and every piece of information. They are the backbone of your administration, but they also represent a powerful, often conservative force, upholding tradition and protocol. You rely on their accuracy and their loyalty, but also remain wary of their potential for manipulation or self-enrichment. Remember those corrupt officials from the Great Wall segment. They existed here too. The sheer mental fatigue of this endless administration is profound. You're constantly reading, listening, assessing, and deciding. There are no clear off hours. Even during your personal time, you are still Pharaoh, and urgent matters can arise at any moment. The responsibility for the well-being of the entire two lands rests squarely on your shoulders, a crushing burden of duty and vigilance. You feel the dry papyrus against your fingers, the constant murmur of voices in the administrative chambers, and the immense, unyielding pressure to make the right decisions. Always. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless rituals. It's about the relentless when grinding reality of bureaucracy and endless administration. Your life is a continuous torrent of reports, petitions, and decisions, transforming your divine kingship into a supremely demanding executive role, where every piece of paper represents a vital aspect of your kingdom's survival and your sanity. Beyond the crushing weight of bureaucracy, a far more insidious and often agonizing burden defined your life as pharaoh, one woven directly into your very lineage inbreeding genetic fallout. Forget the joyous celebration of royal births, the relentless practice of intermarriage within the royal family, often with siblings or close relatives. While intended to maintain the purity of the divine bloodline, tragically brought with it a horrifying array of genetic deformities, chronic illnesses, and debilitating conditions that often plagued pharaohs from birth, making your own body a living testament to a terrible tradition. You quickly learn that your sacred ancestry is a biological curse, and that the purity of your blood comes at the unimaginable price of your own health and physical suffering. It's like being born into a family with a secret, invisible disease that systematically tries to dismantle you, all for the sake of ancient tradition. You rise from your royal bed, perhaps feeling a familiar ache in your joints, or a chronic stiffness in your spine. You might notice a subtle facial asymmetry, or a particular weakness in a limb that has been with you since childhood. These aren't just minor ailments. They are the insidious whispers of your sacred lineage, the genetic legacy of generations of close-kin marriage. While not every pharaoh suffered from overt deformities, The increased risk of inheriting deleterious recessive genes was a constant, terrifying gamble for each royal birth. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with the idealized images of perfect pharaohs is that the ancient Egyptian royal families commonly practiced sibling or close relative marriage, Jack, marrying sisters or half-sisters, primarily to maintain the purity of the divine bloodline and concentrate power. But this led to a high incidence of genetic disorders, congenital deformities, and inherited diseases within the pharaonic dynasties, significantly impacting their health and lifespan. The pursuit of divine purity came with a very human, biological cost. Think about it, marrying your sister wasn't just allowed, it was almost expected, for the sake of the gods. Imagine the constant procession of ailments. You might suffer from a congenital heart defect, making even simple exertion difficult. Your immune system might be compromised, making you highly susceptible to the myriad diseases that plagued ancient Egypt. Remember those from Section 6 of Why You Wouldn't Survive a Day in Ancient Egypt. You could be plagued by chronic pain, skeletal abnormalities, or neurological issues that gradually worsen over time, silently undermining your ability to fulfill your immense duties. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the clear physical evidence of this practice comes from the mummies themselves. Modern scientific analysis of royal mummies, including X-rays and DNA analysis, like for Tutankhamun, has revealed compelling evidence of congenital deformities, bone abnormalities, and genetic diseases that are strongly indicative of generations of inbreeding. Imagine scientists centuries later examining your mummified remains and definitively proving that your parents were siblings, simply from the shape of your bones. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of royal inbreeding maintaining divine purity and concentrating power truly outweighed the very real biological costs of increased illness and genetic defects, or if the system was simply perpetuated due to deeply ingrained tradition and religious belief. Despite its obvious detrimental effects on royal health and succession, did it strengthen dynasties or subtly weaken them over generations? The burden of these inherited ailments was immense. As Pharaoh, you're expected to be the strong, perfect embodiment of divine order, the physical representation of Ma'at. Yet, your own body might be a constant source of pain, weakness, and imperfection. This internal struggle, the contradiction between your divine image and your human frailty, is a solitary, agonizing burden that few would ever truly understand. Your physicians. The royal doctors remember how primitive ancient medical care was. From Section 9 of Why You Wouldn't Survive a Day in Ancient Egypt, could offer little beyond rudimentary remedies, magical incantations, or palliative care. They might try to soothe your pain or offer strange concoctions, but they had no understanding of genetics, no way to cure the fundamental flaws woven into your very being. You rely on their limited knowledge, knowing that your body is slowly betraying you, a victim of your own sacred lineage. The impact extends beyond your personal suffering. Your ability to rule, to lead armies, which we'll discuss later, to perform those ceaseless rituals, could be severely hampered by chronic illness or physical weakness. Succession itself becomes a terrifying gamble, with each new royal birth potentially bringing a new generation burdened by even more severe genetic fallout. The purity of the bloodline, for all its sacred intent, was a double-edged sword, constantly threatening the stability and strength of the very dynasty it sought to preserve. You feel the persistent ache in your bones, the occasional tremor in your hands, and the profound, chilling realization that your own body, the vessel of a living God, is a fragile, flawed testament to a terrible tradition. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless duties or political threats. It's about the horrifying, insidious reality of inbreeding. Your life is a constant, agonizing battle against your own genetic destiny, a burden inherited from generations of sacred intermarriage, ensuring that even your divine body was a site of constant, silent suffering, a terrible price for the golden cage of absolute power. Beyond the invisible genetic burdens that gnawed at your body, your life as Pharaoh was also plagued by a more overt, yet equally terrifying, constant peril, assassination, constant threat. Forget the peaceful slumber of an ordinary ruler. As the living embodiment of a god and the wielder of absolute power, you were perpetually surrounded by ambitious courtiers, disgruntled officials, and jealous family members, all of whom might see your demise as their path to glory. You quickly learn that the higher the throne, the sharper the knives concealed in the shadows, turning your magnificent palace into a gilded cage of paranoia, where every loyal face could hide a deadly secret. It's like living in a perpetual real-life game of Among Us, but everyone is a potential imposter, and if you get voted off, you die. For real. You wake each morning, not just to the routine of ritual and bureaucracy, but to a subtle, nagging sense of unease. Every meal served, every cup of wine offered, every new servant in your inner chambers is scrutinized. You observe your trusted advisors, your military commanders, even your own family members, searching for the slightest flicker of ambition, the faintest hint of disloyalty. This isn't just healthy caution. It's a constant, exhausting vigilance that gnaws at your peace of mind, transforming trust into a dangerous luxury. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the image of unchallenged pharaonic rule is that numerous ancient Egyptian pharaohs faced genuine threats of assassination from ambitious viziers, disgruntled priests, rebellious generals, or rival factions within their own royal families, leading to documented plots, coups, and violent deaths that highlight the constant peril of holding ultimate power. The golden cage, remember that from the intro, was often a very dangerous one. Think about it, the very people closest to you, those who bathe you and feed you, might also be plotting your demise. Imagine the subtle poison. It's the assassin's preferred method for discreet kills, allowing them to remain unseen. Remember that from How a Medieval Assassin's Life Sucked, your food is tasted by a designated taster, often an enslaved person whose life is literally sacrificed for your safety. Your wine is poured from sealed amphorae, carefully guarded. Yet, even these precautions are not foolproof. A new cook could be bribed, a loyal taster replaced, or a potent, slow-acting poison administered over time, subtly undermining your health. The fear of a poisoned meal, a tainted drink, or even poisoned garments is a constant, chilling undercurrent to your luxurious life. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the extreme paranoia around this threat is the historical evidence of royal officials being found guilty of using magic and spells to attempt to harm the pharaoh, suggesting that plots weren't always purely physical. Some papyri detail accusations of using wax figures, curses, or magical incantations against the monarch, considered a form of treason punishable by death. Imagine discovering that your top advisor is trying to curse you to death with a voodoo doll, right there in your palace. Historians still argue whether the frequency of documented assassination attempts or coups against pharaohs was primarily a sign of inherent political instability in the Egyptian state, where power transitions were often violent. or if it also reflected the immense personal ambition of powerful individuals who saw the ultimate prize of the throne as worth any risk, regardless of the divine status of the pharaoh. Was it political instability or individual ambition that fueled these plots? Beyond poison, the threat of a dagger in the night is always present. Your personal guards, the soldiers who protect your palace, are loyal. Yes, but their loyalty can be bought, or their vigilance can lapse. A sudden ambush in a darkened corridor, a surprise attack during a public procession. Remember that concept from the medieval assassin script, where they target powerful figures, or a pre-planned attack during sleep. These are all terrifying possibilities that haunt your waking and sleeping hours. The source of the threat is often within your own household, your own family, a disgruntled brother, a jealous half-sister, an ambitious son. Those closest to you often have the most to gain from your death and the easiest access. The very people you are supposed to trust, your blood relatives, can be your most dangerous enemies. This adds a profound layer of psychological burden to your existence, transforming familial bonds into a potential viper's nest of intrigue and betrayal. You live in a state of perpetual vigilance, your nerves frayed, your mind constantly racing, searching for hidden motives, deciphering veiled threats. Every whispered conversation, every unexpected movement, every new face is a potential sign of impending doom. The magnificent palace, with its sprawling gardens and opulent chambers, feels less like a home and more like a beautifully decorated trap. You feel the constant thrum of anxiety, the cold knot of fear in your gut, and the profound, isolating burden of absolute power, knowing that it makes you the ultimate target. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless duties. It's about the terrifying, insidious reality of assassination. Your life is a constant, terrifying gamble against plots and betrayals from those closest to you, transforming every meal, every walk, and every night's sleep into a perilous test of survival, where death lurks in every shadow, a constant reminder of the heavy price of wearing the double crown. Beyond the insidious threats of assassination within your own palace, your role as pharaoh demanded you confront a far more overt and terrifying danger: warfare, unforgiving battles. Forget merely issuing orders from a distant throne. As the supreme commander of Egypt's armies, you were expected, often even compelled by tradition, to personally lead your troops into the chaos of ancient combat, facing physical danger, immense strategic pressure, and the chilling reality of bloodshed firsthand. You quickly learn that your divine status offers little protection from a well-aimed arrow or a charging enemy, turning the battlefield into a crucible where your life and the fate of your empire hung precariously in the balance. It's like being the CEO of a massive company, but your quarterly meetings involve personally leading an armed charge into a rival's headquarters. You stand in your war chariot, perhaps adorned in ceremonial armor, the sun glinting off your regalia. Around you, the vast Egyptian army stretches across the desert plains, disciplined ranks of infantry carrying spears and shields, archers with their bows drawn, and the thundering chariots of your elite guard. The air is thick with dust, the metallic tang of sweat and fear, and the nervous murmur of thousands of men awaiting your command. In the distance, the enemy army, perhaps the Hittites, the Libyans, or the Sea Peoples, forms its own menacing lines. Your presence on the battlefield is not just for morale, it is a sacred duty. As pharaoh, you are believed to be the embodiment of the war god Montu, or a manifestation of Horus, leading your forces with divine favor. Your courage, your strategic acumen, and your very aura are thought to determine the outcome of the battle. Retreat or cowardice is not an option. It would be a catastrophic blow to your legitimacy and to the morale of your entire army. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with the image of a pharaoh as a static, ceremonial figure is that ancient Egyptian pharaohs, particularly during the New Kingdom, were actively involved in military campaigns, personally leading their armies from chariots or on foot, making strategic decisions, and facing direct physical danger in battle, reflecting their role as supreme commanders and divine warriors. Their military prowess was integral to their image and their actual power. Think about it, Ramses VI, who famously fought at Kadesh, wasn't just directing from afar, he was in the thick of it. Imagine the deafening roar as the two armies clash, the rhythmic beat of war drums, the blare of trumpets, the shouts of commanders, the thunder of chariots, and the horrifying screams of men. Arrows whistle through the air, spears fly, and swords clang against shields. The dust kicked up by thousands of feet and hooves creates a blinding haze, disorienting your senses. You are in the heart of a chaotic, brutal melee, where survival is often a matter of split-second reactions and sheer luck. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the meticulous detail of Egyptian military planning and the pharaoh's oversight is the extensive use of detailed battle reliefs carved on temple walls, depicting the pharaoh often single-handedly vanquishing hordes of enemies. While these are certainly propagandistic exaggerations of your actual combat prowess, they show the immense public expectation that you, as pharaoh, were a divine, unstoppable warrior, capable of turning the tide of battle through your personal intervention. Imagine being expected to live up to a comic book hero's reputation in every single battle, knowing that if you merely fought like a normal, albeit highly trained human, it would be considered a divine failure. Historians still argue whether the pharaoh's actual personal combat skill and tactical genius were consistently high throughout the dynasties, leading to genuine battlefield successes, or if their presence on the field was primarily symbolic and ritualistic, designed to inspire troops and legitimize victories, with actual tactical command often resting with professional generals. Was it genuine martial prowess or powerful propaganda that defined their battlefield role? Your position in a chariot offers mobility and a vantage point, but it also makes you a prime target. Enemy archers would relentlessly rain arrows down on your position, aiming for your distinctive regalia. Charging infantry or rival chariots would attempt to break your lines and reach you. You are constantly under threat, relying on your personal guard, the skill of your charioteer, and your own reflexes to avoid a fatal blow. The mental strain is immense. You're making life or death decisions in the heat of battle, directing troop movements, assessing enemy weaknesses, and inspiring your men. The responsibility for thousands of lives and the very security of your empire rests on your ability to remain calm, decisive, and courageous amidst the carnage. A single strategic error could lead to devastating defeat, undermining your authority and potentially costing you your throne. The aftermath of battle is equally grim. The field is strewn with the dead and dying, both yours and the enemy's. The cries of the wounded, the stench of blood and burning flesh, fill the air. You oversee the collection of prisoners, the counting of enemy dead, and the grim task of identifying your own fallen soldiers. The glory of victory is always tinged with the brutal reality of bloodshed. You feel the vibrations of your chariot, the strain in your arms as you grasp your bow, and the relentless pressure of command. You hear the screams of the fallen, the clash of weapons, and the desperate cries for victory. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless rituals or complex bureaucracy. It's about the terrifying, unforgiving reality of warfare. Your life is a constant gamble on the battlefield, a brutal test of courage and command, ensuring that the heavy price of empire, in blood and lives, was paid not just by your soldiers, but by the divine king himself, a heavy burden for even a living God to bear. Even if your divine prowess on the battlefield brought victory and secured your borders, a more insidious and constant threat loomed over your kingdom, one for which you, as Pharaoh, bore ultimate, divine responsibility. Famine. Divine responsibility. Forget modern agricultural policies or international aid. In ancient Egypt, the very sustenance of your millions of subjects depended entirely on the unpredictable rhythms of the Nile, and should the floods fail, or the harvests dwindle, the resulting widespread starvation was deemed a direct failure of your divine duty, a terrifying burden that could undermine your legitimacy and haunt your reign. You quickly learn that your absolute power comes with an equally absolute responsibility for the very food in your people's mouths, turning every dry season into a personal crisis. It's like being the CEO of a company, but if profits drop, it's not just a bad quarter, it's a sign that the gods are displeased with you, and your entire nation might starve. You stand on the balcony of your palace, perhaps gazing out over the fertile black land of the Nile Valley, now baked hard and cracked by the relentless sun. The usual lush green of the fields is replaced by parched, dusty brown. The air is still, heavy with a tense silence, broken only by the distant, anxious murmurs from the villages. The annual Nile flood, the lifeblood of Egypt, has been meager, or worse, has failed to arrive with sufficient force. This isn't just an agricultural problem, it's a cosmic catastrophe, a direct challenge to Mayat. Remember that cosmic order we talked about in the intro, and your divine duty from Section 2, and you, Pharaoh, are its ultimate guardian. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines this terrifying burden is that the pharaoh was considered directly responsible for the prosperity of Egypt, including the successful inundation of the Nile and bountiful harvests, meaning that widespread famine or agricultural failure was interpreted as a sign of the pharaoh's failure to maintain Mayat or secure divine favor, placing immense pressure and blame directly on the monarch. This belief system intertwined agricultural output with the pharaoh's spiritual and temporal legitimacy, making famine a direct threat to the throne. Think about it. Your job performance review is based on whether it rains. No pressure. Imagine the reports that flood your administrative chambers. Remember that bureaucracy from Section 3. Scribes bring grim news from every nome province. Granaries are emptying, livestock are dying, and the people are beginning to suffer. Petitions from desperate village elders arrive, pleading for grain from the royal stores. The decisions you make are life and death. Literally. Releasing too much grain too soon could leave the reserves depleted for future years. Holding on to it too long could lead to riots, rebellion, and mass starvation, all blamed squarely on you, the divine king. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the pharaoh's desperate attempts to avert famine or at least manage public perception is the historical evidence of pharaohs commissioning detailed records of Nile flood levels on special Nilometers, and sometimes even issuing decrees promising future abundance or attributing current suffering to the moral failings of the people rather than the pharaoh's divine shortcomings. Imagine writing a public relations statement explaining why God is mad at your subjects, not you, when the crops fail. Historians still argue whether the pharaoh's absolute responsibility for natural disasters like famine, while seemingly unfair, inadvertently encouraged more proactive agricultural planning and infrastructure development like irrigation systems and granaries by the central administration, as a desperate attempt to exert human control over an unpredictable environment, or if it simply created a culture of scapegoating and ritualistic appeasement, diverting attention from systemic issues. Did it inspire progress, or just create blame? The social unrest caused by famine could be immense. Hungry people are desperate people. You might hear whispers of discontent, rumors of banditry, or even reports of small-scale rebellions in remote provinces. Your military remember those unforgiving battles from Section 6 might be called upon not to fight foreign enemies, but to suppress internal unrest, an agonizing duty that further drains resources. The stability of your entire kingdom could unravel under the relentless pressure of widespread hunger, even if you, as Pharaoh, were personally spared the pangs of hunger. Your own royal diet, which we'll discuss later, was usually rich. The psychological burden would be crushing. Knowing that millions of your subjects are suffering, that children are dying, and that all of it is ultimately interpreted as your failure to maintain Ma'at, weighs heavily on your divine soul. The prayers from the temples, once filled with praise, now become desperate pleas for your divine intervention, a constant reminder of the crushing responsibility. You walk through your palace, its opulence a stark contrast to the suffering outside, feeling the weight of an invisible crown that demands flawless control over the very elements. You look at the parched earth, then to the Nile, praying for the life-giving flood. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless rituals or warfare. It's about the crushing, existential burden of famine. Your life is a constant, terrifying gamble against nature's indifference, bearing the ultimate divine responsibility for the very sustenance of your nation, a heavy and unavoidable price for wearing the double crown, where every dry season brought the threat of mass starvation, and every hungry stomach whispered accusations against your divine authority. Even as you grapple with the existential threat of famine and the crushing burden of ensuring the Nile's favor, your reign as Pharaoh demands another relentless, monumental, and often utterly exhausting duty. Building projects, relentless demands. Forget a leisurely hobby or a minor infrastructure upgrade. Your divine role compels you to commission and oversee the construction of colossal temples, awe-inspiring pyramids, sprawling palaces, and vast tombs, turning your reign into a ceaseless pursuit of architectural immortality, consuming immense resources and human labor. You quickly learn that your legacy is literally built in stone, and that the pressure to erect structures that defy time and scale is an unending, overwhelming task. It's like being the world's greatest architect, but your clients are demanding impossible monuments that take generations to build, and every stone, every brick, must carry your divine signature. You stand at the edge of a vast quarry, the sun beating down, illuminating thousands of laborers, common peasants, conscripted soldiers, and enslaved individuals. Remember those awful jobs from the ancient Rome segment. Egyptian quarries were just as brutal. The air is thick with dust, the rhythmic clang of hammers on stone, and the shouts of overseers. You are here not just to inspect, but to inspire, to command, to exert your divine will over the very earth, forcing it to yield the raw materials for your grand vision. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines the pharaoh's commitment to monumental construction is that ancient Egyptian pharaohs dedicated immense resources and organized vast workforces. Conscripts, skilled craftsmen, and slaves to construct monumental building projects like pyramids, temples, and obelisks, driven by religious belief, the desire for eternal legacy, and the need to assert divine and temporal power, placing immense and constant pressure on the monarch to fund and oversee these colossal undertakings. Your personal mark on history is literally carved in stone, for all eternity. Imagine the sheer scale of the operation. Thousands of men, working with primitive tools, picks, chisels, mallets, ropes. Remember that primitive tools section from the Great Wall script, quarrying massive blocks of stone, sometimes weighing many tons. These blocks then have to be moved, often for miles, across rough terrain, dragged by sheer human force, or hauled on sledges over oiled tracks. Then comes the precision work shaping the stones, lifting them into place using ramps and leverage, no cranes here, and meticulously fitting them together to create towering walls, colossal columns, and soaring obelisks. Every single step is a testament to immense human effort, organized and driven by your imperial will. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the meticulous planning and sheer scale of these projects and your oversight is the discovery of detailed blueprints and quarry marks left on unfinished blocks, showing the careful planning involved, and even the names of the work gangs. Imagine seeing a piece of unfinished stone, meant for your pyramid, with a note from the stonemason saying, "This one's for Pharaoh. Hope he likes it." Historians still argue whether the monumental scale of Egyptian building projects, particularly the pyramids, was primarily a pragmatic form of unemployment relief and social control during the Nile's flood season when agricultural labor was impossible, providing work for a large population, or if it was predominantly a theological and political imperative, designed to legitimize the pharaoh's divine rule and ensure national unity through collective effort towards a sacred goal. Was it economics or divinity that built these wonders? The pressure to complete these projects is immense. Your reign is finite, but your legacy is eternal. You're expected to leave behind monuments that rival or surpass those of your predecessors, colossal structures that will stand for millennia, bearing your name and proclaiming your divine favor. Delays. Cost overruns. Though concepts of cost were different, or structural failures are not just inconveniences, they are reflections on your divine competence, potentially undermining your legitimacy in the eyes of the gods and your people. You are constantly reviewing progress reports. Remember the bureaucracy, inspecting sites, and consulting with your chief architects and engineers. You approve designs, allocate resources, and make decisions that affect the lives of tens of thousands of laborers. The human cost, in terms of lives lost to accidents, disease, and exhaustion, you've seen those awful jobs, and the invisible killers, is immense. But it is a grim, unacknowledged price for immortality. You sign a decree ordering more conscripted labor, knowing the suffering it will entail, but equally aware of the crushing pressure to complete the grand temple that will secure your eternal glory. Even the logistics of moving colossal statues or massive obelisks, often weighing hundreds of tons, from distant quarries to their final resting places, were feats of engineering and human endurance that would challenge modern technology. You might personally oversee such an undertaking, a massive procession of men and animals straining to move your colossal image across the landscape, a powerful visual display of your divine will. You feel the constant weight of ambition, the relentless demands for progress, and the immense, almost suffocating, pressure to achieve architectural immortality. You gaze at the half-finished walls of your temple, knowing that every stone is a testament to your power, but also to the countless lives sacrificed in its creation. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless rituals or the burden of famine. It's about the relentless demands of building projects. Your life is a continuous, exhausting pursuit of monumental legacy, transforming you into a divine taskmaster, eternally striving to etch your name in stone, a heavy and unyielding price for your pursuit of glory. Even when you stepped away from the crushing demands of bureaucracy and the monumental pressure of building projects, your life as Pharaoh offered no true respite. Instead, you were thrust into a world of relentless scrutiny and rigid conformity. Public appearances stifling etiquette. Forget casual strolls or spontaneous interactions. Every public moment of your life was a meticulously choreographed performance, governed by ancient, unbreakable protocols, demanding unwavering composure, and often forcing you to endure hours of uncomfortable formality. You quickly learn that your divine status comes with an endless parade of rigid rituals, turning every interaction into a staged display and leaving you utterly exhausted by the relentless demands of your own image. It's like being a perpetual mannequin in a very elaborate, very uncomfortable fashion show, where every pose is dictated by ancient tradition and every smile is carefully practiced. You are awakened, dressed, and adorned. Remember those elaborate crowns and ceremonial beards. From Section 2, the Divine King section, by a retinue of specialized attendants. Your day is filled with a series of public audiences. Religious festivals, remember those from Section 2, military reviews, or state ceremonies. The air is often heavy with incense, the murmur of the crowd, and the hushed whispers of your courtiers. Every gesture, every facial expression, every subtle movement of your body is observed, interpreted, and expected to conform to centuries of royal precedent. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines the pharaoh's public life is that the pharaoh's public appearances were meticulously staged and governed by strict, unchanging etiquette and ritual protocol, emphasizing their divine status and maintaining an aura of sacred authority, often requiring hours of motionless posing, repetitive gestures, and adherence to ancient forms of address, leaving little room for spontaneous interaction or personal expression. Your public persona was a deliberate, rigid construction. Think about it. You can't even scratch your nose without it being seen as a cosmic event. Imagine standing for hours on end, unmoving, perhaps on a high dais, while your subjects prostrate themselves before you or present petitions. You are the focal point of all attention, yet you must remain impassive, regal, embodying the stoic perfection of a god. Your eyes are fixed, your movements deliberate, your expression serene. The weight of your regalia, the heat of the sun, remember that relentless sun. Section 2. The buzzing of flies. All must be endured without a flicker of discomfort. A particularly quirky tidbit that exemplifies this rigid formality is the concept of the Pharaoh's silence. Often, during public audiences or presentations, the Pharaoh would respond not with spoken words, but with a symbolic gesture, a nod, or a movement of his scepter, with a scribe then interpreting his will to the petitioner. Imagine constantly needing an interpreter for your nonverbal cues, because speaking aloud too frequently might lessen your divine mystique. Historians still argue whether the extreme formality and ritualized behavior of the pharaoh in public appearances was primarily a deliberate strategy by the elite, both the pharaoh and the priesthood, to reinforce the monarch's divine and unapproachable status, creating a sense of awe and distance from the common people, or if it also served a practical purpose in managing a vast number of interactions without overwhelming the monarch with individual requests. Was it about reinforcing divinity or managing crowds that made appearances so stifling? Your voice, when you do speak, is expected to be measured, resonant, and formal, often reciting ancient formulas or pronouncements, rather than engaging in casual conversation. You are the embodiment of law and order, of divine justice, and your words carry immense weight. This formality makes spontaneous human connection impossible. Even with your own family or closest advisors, you're always, to some extent, performing the role of Pharaoh, a constant, unspoken expectation that transcends private moments. The heat, the heavy regalia, and the sheer mental exhaustion of maintaining such an impassive facade for hours on end are immense. Your body aches, your mind struggles against the relentless demands of ritual, but you cannot falter. Any sign of weakness, any lapse in protocol, could be interpreted as a bad omen, a crack in your divine authority, or a sign of weakness to your rivals. You are carried in elaborate processions through crowded streets, your people cheering, offering prayers, and trying to catch a glimpse of your divine person. You must wave or offer a stylized gesture of blessing, your face a mask of benevolent detachment. The smells, the noise, the press of humanity, all are absorbed by your senses, but your outward response must remain perfectly controlled. You feel the constant strain in your muscles, the subtle ache in your jaw from maintaining a serene expression, and the overwhelming burden of being perpetually on. You long for a moment of quiet, a genuine smile, an unscripted word, but these are luxuries few pharaohs could ever afford. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless duties or political threats. It's about the soul-crushing reality of public appearances. Your life is a continuous, stifling performance, consumed by rigid etiquette and endless formal displays, transforming you into a living icon, perpetually observed, perpetually judged, and forever a prisoner of your own carefully constructed, yet utterly exhausting, divine image. Even when your endless rituals and stifling public appearances permitted a moment's respite, your life as Pharaoh was constantly complicated by another immense, often dangerous. Responsibility, foreign relations, tricky diplomacy. Forget straightforward alliances or clear-cut declarations of war. The ancient Near East was a tangled web of powerful empires, ambitious city-states, and shifting loyalties, requiring constant, meticulous negotiation, veiled threats, and profound strategic cunning to maintain Egypt's dominance without inviting catastrophic conflict. You quickly learn that your words, your gifts, and your veiled intentions in a diplomatic exchange could determine the fate of provinces, the lives of thousands, and the very security of your empire. It's like being a perpetual chess master playing multiple games simultaneously, where every move is public, every opponent is treacherous, and losing means war. You sit in your audience chamber, perhaps adorned in less formal, but still regal, attire, preparing to receive foreign envoys. The air is thick with anticipation, carrying the unfamiliar sense of distant lands, myrrh from Punt, cedar from Lebanon, or the dust of Hittite plains. Before you stand representatives from powerful empires like Mitanni, the Hittites, or Babylon, or perhaps a desperate messenger from a smaller vassal state pleading for aid against a growing threat. Your scribes are ready. diligently preparing to record every word, every nuance. For these are not casual conversations. They are highly formalized. High-stakes negotiations where every phrase is carefully weighed. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines this constant diplomatic tightrope walk is that ancient Egyptian pharaohs were deeply engaged in complex and often precarious international diplomacy. Maintaining elaborate correspondence like the Amarna letters, exchanging lavish gifts, forming strategic alliances, often through royal marriages, and issuing veiled threats, all to manage relations with powerful rival empires and maintain control over their vast network of vassal states. This required constant vigilance, political acumen, and a deep understanding of foreign cultures and power dynamics. Think about it. Your social life involves endless, polite arguments with people who might literally start a war if you offend them. Imagine the exchange of letters. These aren't quick emails. They are meticulously crafted diplomatic missives, written on clay tablets or papyrus, taking weeks or months to travel across vast distances. Your scribes would read incoming messages, perhaps complaining about a lack of gold, questioning your recent military maneuvers, or demanding a royal bride. Your responses are equally careful, full of flowery language, subtle demands, veiled warnings, and declarations of eternal friendship that might mask underlying tensions. You dictate your words, knowing that every syllable will be scrutinized by foreign kings and their advisors. A particularly quirky tidbit that highlights the blend of diplomacy and personal appeal is the frequent exchange of lavish gifts between pharaohs and foreign rulers. These weren't just tokens. They were vital tools of diplomacy, demonstrating wealth, power, and generosity. A gift of rare gold, exotic animals, or exquisite craftsmanship could smooth over a diplomatic spat or solidify an alliance. Imagine having to send a crate of live crocodiles to your Babylonian counterpart just to prove your good intentions. Historians still argue whether the elaborate and often costly system of gift exchange in ancient Near Eastern diplomacy was primarily a sophisticated method of economic redistribution and a display of imperial wealth, or if it also served as a crucial psychological tool, fostering personal bonds and mutual respect between monarchs, thereby genuinely contributing to peace and stability beyond mere material exchange. Was it about economics, or about building personal rapport, that made gifts so important? Strategic marriages were another crucial, yet often personal tool of diplomacy. You might arrange for a daughter or a sister to marry a foreign king, or accept a foreign princess into your own harem. These alliances, while securing peace or political leverage, often came at a personal cost for the royal women involved, who were sent far from home, often never to return. Your own family becomes a pawn in the grand game of international politics. The constant threat of war, remember those unforgiving battles from Section 6, looms over every diplomatic exchange. A misstep, a perceived insult, or a refusal to compromise could quickly escalate into armed conflict. You are always weighing the costs of war against the demands of diplomacy, constantly assessing the strength of your rivals and the loyalty of your vassals, the security of your borders, the flow of trade, and the lives of your soldiers depend on your ability to navigate this treacherous international landscape. You feel the immense pressure of every diplomatic encounter, every carefully chosen word, and the knowledge that the smallest misjudgment could have catastrophic consequences. You listen intently to the veiled threats in a foreign king's letter, or the subtle demands disguised as polite requests from a neighboring empire. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless duties or the burden of famine. It's about the complex, dangerous reality of foreign relations. Your life is a continuous tightrope walk across a treacherous international stage, demanding unwavering strategic cunning, diplomatic finesse, and a profound understanding of shifting loyalties, ensuring that the heavy price of empire, in terms of global stability and personal vigilance, was a constant, exhausting burden for even a divine king. Even as you meticulously manage the vast bureaucracy and skillfully navigate the treacherous waters of international diplomacy, the greatest and most chilling threat to your reign as Pharaoh often came not from distant lands, but from the very heart of your own palace, succession treachery within. Forget notions of familial love or peaceful transitions. The immense power and divine status of the throne made it an irresistible prize, turning ambitious siblings, jealous half-brothers, and impatient sons into potential rivals, constantly plotting your downfall or simply waiting for your moment of weakness. You quickly learn that your own family, those bound by blood and shared lineage, could be your most dangerous enemies, making every intimate interaction a dance with potential betrayal. It's like being the head of a family business, but every family meeting is a high-stakes game of Clue, and the prize for guessing correctly is staying alive. You sit at a private meal, perhaps with your closest family members, your great royal wife, your sons, your trusted advisors. The atmosphere might seem relaxed, but your senses are always heightened. You observe their expressions, their subtle gestures, listening for any hint of impatience, any flicker of ambition in their eyes. The memory of past pharaohs, perhaps even your own ancestors, who met untimely ends at the hands of ambitious relatives, haunts your thoughts. This isn't just about political maneuvering. It's about a cold, calculated game of survival within your own bloodline. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the idealized image of a harmonious royal family is that succession to the pharaonic throne was frequently fraught with intrigue, assassinations, and power struggles within the royal family, with ambitious sons, brothers, or even queens plotting against the reigning pharaoh or each other to secure the immense power and divine status of the kingship. The throne was the ultimate prize, often pursued with ruthless determination, leading to violent purges or mysterious deaths. Think about it. Your own children might literally be planning your demise for a promotion. Imagine the whispers that reach your ears. A trusted courtier reports that your eldest son has been meeting secretly with certain disgruntled generals, remember those from Warfare Section 6. Or your vizier, usually loyal, seems to be subtly undermining your authority in the administrative bureaucracy from Section 3. Or perhaps a younger, more ambitious queen in your harem, if you have one, is gaining undue influence, potentially seeking to elevate her own son over your chosen heir. Every rumor, every piece of gossip, becomes a potential clue in a deadly puzzle. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the extreme lengths taken by ambitious family members, particularly from the later periods, is the notorious harem conspiracy against Ramses III. This plot, involving one of his secondary wives and her son, allegedly included the use of black magic. Remember magic and curses from the disturbing funeral rites script and attempted assassination by poisoning the pharaoh. Imagine your own stepmother and half-brother hiring magicians and poisoning your dinner to get rid of you. Historians still argue whether the frequency of documented internal plots and assassinations against pharaohs was primarily a direct consequence of the immense, centralized power of the throne, making it an irresistible target, or if the lack of a clear, universally accepted system of primogeniture right of the firstborn for much of Egyptian history often created inherent instability and encouraged ambitious family members to resort to violence to secure succession. Was it power's allure, or unclear rules, that fueled such treachery? The threat of poison, remember poison's peril from the Assassin's Life Sucked script, and drink wine, wine, and more wine from Roman parties. Section 5, talking about lead acetate, is ever present, even more so from within your household. The royal tasters and food preparers are loyal, yes, but their loyalty can be bought, or their lives threatened, by those seeking to eliminate you discreetly. You might impose stricter security, limit access to your food and drink, but the fundamental intimacy of your daily life makes complete protection almost impossible. Beyond assassination, your rivals might attempt to undermine your legitimacy. They could spread rumors about your declining health, a problem given the inbreeding. Remember Section 4. Question your divine favor, especially during famines, from Section 7. Or even manipulate priests to claim the gods are displeased with you, tying into Divine King constant rituals. Section 2. Your reign is a constant performance, and any perceived weakness could be exploited by those eager to seize your power. You feel the cold weight of suspicion, the constant tension in your family interactions, and the chilling knowledge that the very people who should be your staunchest allies are often your most dangerous enemies. You observe your sons, your brothers, their faces mirroring your own regal composure, but their eyes potentially harboring hidden ambitions. The magnificent palace, with its sprawling gardens and opulent chambers, feels less like a home and more like a beautifully decorated arena where a silent, deadly game of succession is constantly being played. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless duties or external threats. It's about the profound, soul-crushing reality of treachery within your own family. Your life is a constant gamble against ambitious relatives, a perpetual dance with suspicion and betrayal, ensuring that even your most intimate moments are shadowed by the chilling possibility that those closest to you are plotting your downfall. A heavy and inescapable price for the absolute power of the double crown. Even if you somehow navigated the treacherous waters of internal family intrigue, your life as Pharaoh remained perpetually vulnerable to another, more cosmic, and utterly inescapable burden's divine punishment. Unseen blame. Forget policy debates or economic downturns. In ancient Egypt, every natural disaster, every misfortune that befell the land, was interpreted as a direct manifestation of divine displeasure, and you, as the living God-King, bore the ultimate, crushing responsibility for these perceived cosmic failures. You quickly learn that your absolute power comes with an equally absolute accountability for forces entirely beyond your control, turning every drought, every plague, and every military defeat into a direct indictment of your divine favor, and leaving you perpetually vulnerable to the terrifying blame of both gods and mortals. It's like being the CEO of a company, but if there's a hurricane, or a meteorite strikes, or the crops fail, it's all your fault. And everyone, including your board of directors, the priests, believes it's because you personally displeased the universe. You wake one morning to news that sends a chill through your spine. The Nile, your kingdom's very lifeblood, has failed to flood adequately. Or perhaps its inundation was too violent, destroying crops rather than nourishing them. Remember that crushing burden of famine from Section 7. Or reports arrive from distant villages of a virulent plague sweeping through the populace. Recall those invisible killers from Why You Wouldn't Survive a Day in Ancient Egypt. Section 6. The air in your palace, usually filled with the murmur of administrative tasks, now hums with a palpable anxiety. These aren't just natural phenomena, they are profound signs of Ma'at cosmic order, Remember that from section 1 and 2 being disrupted. And as its divine guardian, the blame, both divine and mortal, falls squarely on you. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines this terrifying burden is that ancient Egyptian pharaohs were held directly responsible for maintaining Ma'at cosmic order, justice, and prosperity, meaning that natural disasters like failed Nile floods, widespread famine, plagues, or military defeats were widely interpreted as signs of the pharaoh's failure to appease the gods or uphold divine order, leading to a crisis of legitimacy and immense pressure on the monarch. Your job literally required you to prevent bad weather and disease through your divine actions. Imagine the accusations, perhaps whispered at first among the common people, then articulated more formally by the powerful priesthood. If the Nile fails to flood, if the crops wither, they might interpret it as your failure to perform the proper rituals. Remember, constant rituals. Section 2. Or a sign of your personal impiety. If disease decimates the population, it could be seen as your inability to protect your people, a direct consequence of your spiritual shortcomings. The weight of millions of suffering subjects, all looking to you for divine intervention, is immense, a psychological burden far heavier than any physical crown. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the extreme lengths a pharaoh might go to deflect or prove his divine favor during times of crisis is the commissioning of famine stelae or similar inscriptions. These texts would detail a divine oracle or a personal dream where the pharaoh performs a ritual or makes an offering that supposedly brings an end to the famine, subtly shifting the blame or claiming credit for a natural recovery. Imagine commissioning a giant stone tablet that essentially says, "The famine was bad, but then I prayed really hard, and now it's fine, so clearly. I'm still divine. Don't blame me." Historians still argue whether the pharaohs genuinely believed in their absolute power to influence natural events through ritual, reflecting a profound personal conviction in their divine role, or if their public pronouncements and ritualistic interventions during crises were primarily a strategic political tool, designed to manage public perception, maintain popular faith in the monarchy, and deflect blame from their own administrative shortcomings. Was it true faith or cunning PR that defined their response to divine blame? Beyond natural disasters, military defeats, remember, unforgiving battles. Section 6 could also be interpreted as divine displeasure. If your armies suffered a catastrophic loss, it wasn't just a tactical failure. It could be seen as a sign that the gods had withdrawn their favor from you, that your Ma'at was out of balance. This could embolden internal rivals. Remember, treachery within. Section 11, or external enemies, further destabilizing your reign. The priesthood, whose power depended on the belief in divine favor and the meticulous performance of rituals, would be particularly vocal during these crises. They might demand more elaborate offerings, more stringent rituals, or even suggest that specific reforms were needed to appease the angered gods, indirectly exerting influence over your policies. You're caught between maintaining your image as a perfect god-king and the very real, earthly suffering that threatens your legitimacy. You feel the constant hum of anxiety, the subtle shift in the courtiers' glances, the nervous whispers that reach your ears, every cloudless sky during flood season, every new report of illness, every distant rumbling of discontent from a suffering village sends a jolt of fear through your soul. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless duties or political threats. It's about the crushing, inescapable reality of divine punishment. Your life is a perpetual tightrope walk across a cosmos that holds you personally accountable for every misfortune, every natural disaster, and every suffering of your people, transforming your divine authority into an immense, terrifying burden of unseen blame, a heavy and unyielding price for your unique, terrifying, and utterly unpredictable job. Even as you wrestle with the existential dread of divine punishment and the constant weight of unseen blame, your daily life as Pharaoh presented a more personal and, ironically, self-inflicted burden. Diet-rich, unhealthy. Forget a balanced nutritional plan or the lean fare of the common Egyptian peasant. Your royal meals were an endless parade of rich, fatty meats, sugary treats, and abundant wine, consumed in quantities that were often detrimental to your health, silently contributing to various ailments and shortening your divine lifespan. You quickly learn that luxury on the plate comes at the price of your own well-being, turning every extravagant meal into a slow, delicious, and ultimately debilitating form of self-sabotage. It's like being forced to attend a never-ending, opulent buffet where every dish is incredibly tempting, but every bite also brings you closer to a terrible case of ancient diabetes or heart disease. You sit upon a finely carved chair or recline upon a cushioned couch at a private dining table laden with an astonishing array of food. The aromas are rich and complex, a stark contrast to the coarse bread and limited vegetables of the common populace. Remember their monotonous diet from Why You Wouldn't Survive a Day in Ancient Egypt. Section 5. Enslaved cooks and servants hover, eager to replenish your plate with the finest delicacies. Your meals are not just sustenance, they are a daily display of your immense wealth and status, a constant indulgence in the bounty of the land and the fruits of empire. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with the image of a hardy ruler is that the diet of ancient Egyptian pharaohs and the elite was typically very rich in fats, sugars from honey and fruits, refined grains, and meat, often consumed in large quantities, leading to archaeological and textual evidence suggesting common issues like obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and dental problems among the royal class. This opulent diet, while a sign of wealth, was far from healthy by modern standards. Think about it. While your subjects were worried about scurvy, you were worried about clogged arteries. Imagine the sheer volume of meat, roast beef, succulent gazelle, plump geese, and various types of fish far fresher and more elaborately prepared than the common dried stockfish would be presented in abundance. These were fatty cuts, cooked with rich sauces and plenty of oil, providing a massive caloric and protein intake. You would pick at tender morsels, perhaps offering some to a favored courtier, but the quantity available far exceeded your actual needs. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the pharaoh's unique access to sweet things is the sheer amount of honey consumed. As the primary sweetener in ancient Egypt, honey was used in desserts, to sweeten beverages, and even in some savory dishes. While a common person might get honey rarely, your table would feature it constantly, in cakes, pastries, and honey-glazed meats. Imagine consuming an amount of sugar daily that would make a modern dentist faint, all from pure, unadulterated honey. Historians still argue whether the apparent high incidence of certain lifestyle-related diseases like atherosclerosis or type 2 diabetes among mummified pharaohs was primarily a direct consequence of their rich and indulgent diet, proving a clear link between ancient diet and chronic illness, or if the prevalence of these conditions was also exacerbated by genetic predispositions due to royal inbreeding. Remember Section 4 and the relative lack of strenuous physical activity compared to their subjects. Was it purely their diet, or a combination of factors, that made pharaohs so unhealthy? Your grains, while still bread-based, would be from the finest, most meticulously sifted flour, leading to softer, more palatable loaves. But this refinement meant less fiber, and when combined with a lack of roughage from vegetables, which, though available, might be consumed less enthusiastically than meat and rich dishes, it could contribute to digestive issues. Fresh fruits, when in season, would be abundant, but likely consumed alongside, or coated in, more honey and rich sauces. Beverages, primarily wine, flowed freely. Remember that from What Parties Were Like in the Roman Empire. Section 5, where even they diluted it. While some might be diluted, your wines would be of the finest vintage, often spiced or sweetened, consumed in quantities that would lead to constant low-level intoxication and contribute further to your caloric intake and potential liver strain. There's no moderation imposed on a living God. The lack of emphasis on a balanced diet, as understood today, coupled with minimal physical activity, as most heavy labor was performed by others, and your ceremonial duties often involved static posing. From Section 9, contributed to various health problems. Obesity, visible in some royal mummies, was a clear sign of overindulgence. Dental issues. Beyond the simple wear from abrasive grains, remember gnawing truth from the Viking diet. Section 12 would be exacerbated by sugary foods, leading to cavities and infections. You feel the satisfying richness of every bite, the sweet indulgence of every dessert, and the constant, almost cloying fullness in your stomach. But beneath this immediate gratification, you also feel a subtle lethargy, perhaps a familiar heartburn, or a dull ache that signals the unseen toll this luxury is taking. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about endless duties or political threats. It's about the insidious reality of your diet. Your life, seemingly one of ultimate indulgence, is also a slow, culinary self-sabotage, transforming every magnificent feast into a silent contributor to chronic illness, a heavy and ultimately unhealthy price for your divine, opulent existence. Even if you somehow manage to ignore the insidious dietary choices that slowly undermined your health, your unique royal lifestyle as Pharaoh brought its own specific, often excruciating, set of physical burdens and diseases, health royal ailments. Forget a robust, active life. The very privileges of your divine office, the sedentary lifestyle, the constant adornment, the inherent genetic predispositions, contributed to a chronic state of pain, disability, and susceptibility to specific illnesses that would haunt your reign and be etched into your very bones. You quickly learn that your divine body is not immune to the earthly consequences of an unnatural existence, turning your opulent life into a constant battle against chronic suffering. It's like being a magnificent, pampered racehorse that's constantly being forced to carry too much weight, and its joints are slowly, inevitably, giving out. You awaken, not refreshed, but often with a dull ache in your joints, or a stiffness in your spine that has become a familiar companion. Your diet. As we discussed, remember those rich, unhealthy meals. From Section 13, combined with a lack of strenuous physical activity, most heavy lifting is done by enslaved labor, and your public appearances often involve static posing, contributes to a general lack of fitness. Your body, despite being divinely appointed, begins to protest the demands of your lifestyle. One mainstream historical fact that utterly redefines the physical reality of pharaonic health is that archaeological and paleopathological studies of royal mummies reveal a high prevalence of chronic, debilitating conditions such as severe arthritis, especially in the spine, obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, directly linked to their rich diet, sedentary lifestyle, and genetic predispositions from royal inbreeding. Your very remains, centuries later, tell a grim story of your ailments. Think about it. Your eternal resting place becomes a forensic case study of your terrible health. Imagine the constant pain of arthritis. Your spine, neck, and major joints might be stiff, inflamed, and agonizingly painful, especially after long periods of sitting during bureaucratic duties from Section 3, or standing motionless during ritual ceremonies from Section 2. Simple movements, like turning your head or bending down, become a daily challenge. This chronic pain would be a constant background noise to your divine existence, subtly undermining your ability to project a perfectly serene, God-like image. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the unique burdens of pharaonic health is the evidence of widespread dental problems among royalty, specifically severe tooth decay and abscesses, often caused by their high-sugar diet. Honeys, dates, and coarse bread remember that grinding grit. Paradoxically, while common Egyptians had heavily worn teeth from grinding tough grains, recall dental health gnawing truth from the Viking diet. Section 12. Pharaohs suffered more from cavities and subsequent infections due to the refined sugars in their indulgent meals. Imagine ruling an empire with a constant, throbbing toothache that no ancient physician could truly fix, and having your royal banquets contribute directly to it. Historians still argue whether the apparent higher incidence of certain chronic diseases like heart disease or diabetes in mummified pharaohs, compared to common Egyptians, was primarily a direct consequence of their elite, indulgent lifestyle, or if biases in preservation wealthier individuals being mummified more elaborately and the inherent genetic issues from inbreeding. Remember, Section 4 might exaggerate the prevalence of these conditions in the royal line. Was it purely lifestyle, or a combination of factors, that made pharaohs so sickly? Obesity was also a common royal ailment, visible in some depictions and confirmed by mummy studies. A rich diet combined with limited physical exertion led to excess weight, which in turn exacerbated joint problems and contributed to conditions like heart disease and diabetes. Recall the unhealthy diet implications from Section 13. You might find yourself struggling to climb stairs within your palace or to endure long public processions, your body protesting the burden of its own opulence. Beyond these chronic conditions, you were still vulnerable to the same infectious diseases that plagued the common populace. Remember those invisible killers from Why You Wouldn't Survive a Day in Ancient Egypt. Section 6. While your palace might be cleaner than a common hovel, and your food perhaps less contaminated, you were not immune. A sudden fever, a debilitating stomach ailment, or an insidious parasite could strike, and your royal physicians, for all their specialized knowledge, remember, medical care primitive, painful. Section 9 had limited tools to truly cure you. They might offer poultices, herbal remedies, or magical incantations, but they lacked antibiotics or an understanding of germ theory. The burden of these ailments was immense for a ruler who was supposed to be perfect, a divine embodiment of vitality. You would have to conceal your pain, mask your discomfort, and endure your suffering in silence, projecting an image of divine health and strength even as your body slowly betrayed you. This constant performance, combined with your physical infirmities, added another profound layer of stress to your already terrible job. You feel the persistent ache in your bones, the occasional shortness of breath after minimal exertion, and the profound, chilling realization that your magnificent, divine body is slowly succumbing to the very lifestyle that signifies your power. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about warfare or political intrigue. It's about the insidious reality of royal ailments. Your life is a constant battle against chronic pain, debilitating diseases, and the physical consequences of your own opulent existence, transforming your divine rule into a heavy and often agonizing burden of the flesh, a slow, silent decline that ultimately highlights the grim irony of a life of unparalleled luxury. After enduring the relentless rituals, the crushing bureaucracy, the horrifying genetic fallout, the constant threat of assassination, the unforgiving realities of warfare, the crushing burden of famine, the relentless demands of building projects, the stifling public etiquette, the tricky world of foreign diplomacy, the chilling treachery from within, the unseen blame of divine punishment, the unhealthy royal diet, and the specific physical ailments of your luxurious life, you finally emerge from our journey through the pharaoh's existence to confront its ultimate, chilling truth. Legacy, eternal burden. For a pharaoh, death was not a release from duty, but a terrifying transition into an even more demanding, perpetual role in the afterlife. A continuation of your divine obligations that demanded meticulous preparation and faced its own unique perils. You quickly learn that even beyond the grave, your job never truly ends, and your most vital work for Egypt continues for all eternity. It's like retiring from your job, only to find out your new, eternal job is infinitely more complicated, and the stakes are your soul. You reflect on the immense efforts made throughout your life and after your death to ensure your eternal well-being. The meticulous mummification process. Remember those disturbing funeral rites, the brain extraction, the evisceration, the natron drying, the elaborate wrapping from that segment, the canopic jars holding your organs, the amulets protecting your body, the vast array of tomb goods designed to furnish your afterlife. All were part of an elaborate, lifelong preparation for this final, eternal role. Your earthly suffering might end, but your divine responsibility does not. One mainstream historical fact that utterly redefines the concept of death for a pharaoh is that the deceased pharaoh was believed to become an immortal god, joining Osiris and the sun god Ra in the afterlife. But this divine status came with continuing responsibilities, such as interceding with the gods on behalf of Egypt and ensuring cosmic order, requiring their mummified body and tomb to be meticulously prepared and maintained for eternity. Death was merely a promotion to a new, everlasting sphere of influence and duty. Imagine having to work even after you're dead. Imagine the new duties awaiting you. You're expected to join the solar bark of Ra as it traverses the heavens, battling the forces of chaos. Apep each night to ensure the sun rises each morning. Remember that divine responsibility from the intro. Section 1. You must successfully navigate the treacherous underworld, passing through various gates and facing terrifying demons. Proving your worthiness at the judgment of Osiris, recall that crucial opening of the mouth ceremony. Section 11 that enables this. Your knowledge of spells from the Book of the Dead, meticulously placed in your tomb. From Section 12, Tomb Goods, becomes your guide and your weapon in this perilous, eternal journey. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the sheer administrative burden of the afterlife is the inclusion of thousands of Shabti figures in royal tombs. Remember those magical servants from Tomb Goods. These tiny figurines were magically animated to perform any manual labor the deceased pharaoh might be asked to do in the afterlife. allowing the pharaoh to enjoy eternal leisure. Imagine having an army of magical action figures who literally do all your eternal chores for you, just so you can spend your afterlife relaxing and fighting cosmic evil. Historians still argue whether the elaborate and extremely costly preparations for the pharaoh's afterlife were primarily a pragmatic expression of their immense spiritual responsibilities and a literal belief in eternal duties, or if they were also a powerful political tool for the living, designed to legitimize the current reign by connecting it directly to a divine, immortal lineage, showcasing unparalleled wealth and power. Was it true faith or political theater that dictated such immense posthumous preparations? The very preservation of your body, the mummy, is crucial. If your tomb is desecrated, if your name is erased, or if your mummy is destroyed, remember those tomb robbers and curses from the Disturbing Funeral Rites script. Sections 13 and 14. Your Ka and Ba soul and personality could be disrupted, hindering your ability to fulfill your eternal duties and potentially endangering Egypt itself. The constant battle against tomb robbers, even after your death, becomes a critical part of your everlasting legacy. Your legacy, then, is not just about the monuments you built or the wars you won in life. It's about the eternal effectiveness of your post-mortem influence. Your name must be remembered, your rituals continued by your successors, and your tomb protected, all to ensure your divine intercession on behalf of Egypt. Your glory in the afterlife directly impacts the prosperity of the living kingdom, tying your eternal fate to the well-being of the land you once ruled. You feel the stillness of your magnificent tomb, the heavy weight of the sarcophagus, and the chilling realization that death is not a release, but merely a new, terrifying, and eternal set of responsibilities. Your reign, though ended on earth, continues without end in the cosmic dance of the gods. The awful truth about being a pharaoh isn't just about the burdens of life. It's about the profound, inescapable legacy of an eternal burden. Your existence, both mortal and divine, is a perpetual cycle of immense duty, ensuring that even in death, your terrible job as the ultimate guardian of Egypt, the living and dead embodiment of Ma'at, continues for all eternity, a heavy and unyielding price for your divine, unending power. Now, as the golden glow of the pyramids fades into the soft light of your bedside lamp, and the echoes of ancient rituals grow quiet, let the stillness of your room embrace you. The relentless duties, the hidden dangers, and the profound burdens of the pharaoh's life and eternal legacy are safely in the past, part of a history that now dissolves into the gentle hum of your fan. You've journeyed through a world where even a god-king had a terrible job, and now it's time for you to find your own peaceful rest. Let your mind unwind, your muscles relax, and sink into a deep, undisturbed sleep, far from the weight of the double crown and the endless duties of the afterlife. End of script. Sweet dreams.